Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 731. It is another harvest season, and we are thinking of ways to consume food. Soon after Marin returned to Auric, the heads of various provinces sent reports on the bumper harvest of grain. Just as Marin imagined, the originally controlled provinces of East Frisia, Oldenburg, Schleswig and North Munster naturally obtained a bumper harvest because of their advanced agricultural technology and 3 fertilizers. The grain harvest in these 4 regions added up to 2 billion pounds of rye. Among them, the output of Marin's manor alone was as much as 1.3 billion pounds of grain. Even if the grain consumption is excluded, Marin will get a net gain of more than 1 billion pounds of grain this year. And if by next year, the newly acquired manors in Bremen, Jutland and West Frisia also begin to produce according to the new agricultural technology, the total grain output will be even more frightening. With so much grain, Marin dare not sell it openly, which has to be said to be a tragedy. But there is no way, after all, if too much grain is sold, it is easy for people to discover the secret of high grain yield. Fortunately, Marin discovered a good way to brew rye ergoto with surplus grain in time, and found a good place for a large amount of surplus grain. Selling wine is not as eye-catching as selling grain, and Marin also set up several chambers of commerce to pretend to buy grain everywhere, but no one doubted it. Even Marin asked his men to tell others in Germany that a lot of grain was produced abroad. In areas outside Germany, it is another story. Through this means of concealment, everyone is not very clear that the grain used by Marin to make wine is actually self-produced. However, there is also a big problem. That is, even if you sell spirits, the market is limited. Because there are not many people who are addicted to spirits. Moreover, most of them are concentrated in cold Eastern Europe. In Western Europe, there are only a few people who are addicted to spirits. But the problem is that although people in cold areas of Eastern Europe are addicted to spirits, they are poor there. And spirits are very expensive because they consume a lot of grain. This leads to the fact that there are not many Eastern Europeans who can afford spirits, as long as they are some local nobles and wealthy businessmen. As for ordinary people, even if they love strong liquor, they can't afford it. So, Marin has now begun to consider whether to limit the output of grain. Otherwise, if there is too much grain, it can only be piled there to mold, and even if it is brewed, it can't be sold. Fortunately, Marin suddenly remembered England, which had just gone through the war. Now, Northumberland is already under Marin's control. There are tens of thousands of refugees waiting for rice to be cooked there. So Marin ordered to transfer tens of millions of pounds of rye from the granary to help those refugees. Anyway, Marin will cover their food and drink. You know, the total population of Northumberland, including the 60,000 refugees snatched from Henry Percy, is only 70,000 to 80,000. Even if it is 80,000 people, each person eats 1 pound of rye a day, and the daily consumption is only 80,000 pounds. 10 million pounds of rye is enough for them to eat for 125 days. However, Marin suddenly remembered that it seems that the agricultural development level of Northumberland is very low. Now, if you want to develop Northumberland, you need to spend a lot of manpower and material resources, cut down a lot of trees, and dig many irrigation ditches, and these activities will greatly consume people's physical strength and increase food consumption. Even, it will make people eat twice as much. But this is not a problem. For other nobles, doubling their appetite will definitely cost them their lives. Because food is so expensive. But who is Marin? The one who has too much food to eat. So Marin still ordered to organize those refugees to reclaim wasteland and dig ditches and canals on a large scale in Northumberland. Moreover, for those English laborers who participated in digging ditches and canals, Marin promised to provide enough black bread. Even those who performed well would be rewarded with more bread, and those militiamen would be allowed to take it back to their families. In this way, a good place for the grain was found. After counting the grain production of the 4 old provinces, it was the turn of the 3 new provinces, West Frisia, Bremen and Jutland. As for South Munster, including the southern half of Osnabrück, it was still under the control of Bishop Conrad. Before Bishop Conrad's death, Marin had no control over it for the time being. As for the 3 provinces that could be managed, although the area was large, the total output of the 2 cities was less than 100 million pounds. Marin simply thought he had heard it wrong. Because this number was less than 1/20th of the other 4 provinces. However, the area of these 3 new provinces was larger than that of the 4 old provinces. Especially Jutland, which was nearly 20,000 square kilometers. But why was the grain production so low? But the reports from the 3 provinces cleared Marin's confusion. It turned out that it was all caused by the war. Because of the war, Jutland Peninsula and West Frisia were greatly affected. Many fields in these 2 places were barren, and there was not enough labor to cultivate them. Only in Bremen province, because it was replaced, the agriculture was not greatly affected. In the end, the result was that the grain produced by these 3 new provinces was barely enough for the local people to consume. In fact, because most of the grain was concentrated in the hands of the nobles and junker landlords, many serfs had to starve. But this was not a problem. Marin decided to take some old grain out of the warehouse, mix it with some straw chaff, and make economical kohler bread to help the starving serfs in the 3 new provinces. In this way, it can be regarded as earning a wave of people's hearts, which is conducive to the stability of rule. In addition, Marin also plans to transport a batch of grain to his territory on the island of Ireland, County Wicklow. Although the island of Ireland is backward, the population is not small. Although the war has led to a sparse population in the eastern part of the island of Ireland. However, the island of Ireland is currently a famous poor and remote place in Europe. As long as there is enough bread, a large number of refugees can definitely be attracted. You know, the island of Ireland is different from other parts of Europe. Because there are many indigenous forces, they attack each other, resulting in unstable political situation on the island. In addition, on the island of Ireland, only some areas with less rainfall in the east and northeast are suitable for agriculture. In the west, because it faces the Atlantic Ocean, the precipitation is too frequent and excessive, making most areas of the island unsuitable for agriculture. Therefore, sheep farming and fishing are popular on the island of Ireland, and the settlement attributes of the population are poor. As long as Marin produces food, it is still very convenient to attract some Irish herders and fishermen to move here. You know, those Irish herders and fishermen are not as homesick as farmers. After all, herders and fishermen have no land, and there is nothing to be nostalgic about when they move, so they just pack up and leave. Therefore, it is more convenient to recruit. Only by recruiting enough people can the development of Wicklow County, which covers an area of more than 2,000 square kilometers, proceed smoothly. Moreover, Wicklow County is located on the eastern coast of Ireland, just in the shadow part that is not involved in the Atlantic rainwater zone. It is an area on the island of Ireland with less oil and suitable for agriculture. It is also very good to develop it. Marin does not have any discrimination against the Irish. Although he has always advocated the superiority of the Germanic race, he doesn't think so in his heart. Although the Irish are Celts, not Germans, they are also very good subjects if they are used well. Of course, Marin plans to use food to win over these Irish people. But at the same time, he will teach Irish children to speak English and German through free compulsory education and other means. After 3 generations, the Irish will speak English or German, and there will be no difference between them and the Germans. At that time, it will be easy to integrate into the big family by strengthening integration. As for why the Irish and the English couldn't urinate in the same pot in history, Marin thinks it is mainly because of language and customs. In addition, the influence of religion is also great. The English converted to the Protestant Anglican Church, and the Irish still believe in Catholicism. It would be strange if the 2 races could integrate. Marin thinks the problem of language and customs is easy to solve. Free compulsory education, and it is mandatory to use only English in class. After several generations of education, the Irish, who originally looked similar, are not much different from the Germanic English. Originally, in history, although the English ruled Ireland, they did not promote English education, so that the Irish continued to be illiterate and use the native Irish language. Illiterate people like to preserve traditions the most. In this way, it will be difficult to integrate the Irish in a few hundred years. Marin has experienced China in the 21st century. In China in the 21st century, those ethnic minority compatriots who originally had different customs from the Han people, after receiving modern education, except for people of a special sect who have unique habits such as not eating pork, young people of other nationalities, whether in clothing or in speech and behavior, are no different from the Han people. Only those elderly ethnic minority compatriots who stay in the village have retained many traditional customs because they have no culture. Of course, people in later generations like to travel and like to see those customs that are different from the mainstream culture, so the country specially protects those minority cultures, especially the song and dance culture. Otherwise, they will all be assimilated in a few generations. Even so, Marin firmly believes that as long as the descendants of those minorities walk out of the mountain village, no one will be able to tell that they are minorities in a few generations. Even Marin himself was not very clear about the traditional culture of the Han nationality in his previous life. As long as free compulsory education is used, people's language and pronunciation can be unified with the same pronunciation of phonetic symbols. When people speak the same language with the same accent, it is easy to integrate as long as they are of the same skin color. Just like in the big cities of China in later generations, those fellow villagers who are in groups and even fight with outsiders are mostly those who are older and can't speak Mandarin. And people like Marin who speak Mandarin well don't feel much regional differences between colleagues at work. Therefore, Marin plans to take advantage of the fact that there is a lot of food in his hands and teach Irish children to speak English with a London accent by providing free compulsory education. When they grow up, there will not be too much estrangement from the English. Since we all speak the same language with the same accent, it's easy to blend in. Chapter 732, Aben is back. Marin was full of emotion. He did not expect that he would have such a huge worry about how to consume food. If his worries were known by other European nobles, they might be beaten up in groups. It was precisely because of the fear of group fights and the need for great voyages that Marin planned England. However, to be honest, England is too humid, with more rainy and foggy weather. Therefore, when the British meet and greet each other, they ask how the weather is and sigh that the weather is good. If Marin did not know the importance of England to the great voyages, he would not be willing to seize this humid and foggy island country. In addition, after England was seized, it can also be regarded as an important retreat for the Hoffman family. If one day he is beaten up by all of Europe on land, he can also take a boat to escape to England to make a comeback and kill back to Germany. As long as England builds a strong and regular fleet, coupled with an unlimited supply of Chilean saltpeter, it will not be afraid even if all of Europe unites. The two world wars fully prove that as long as the navy is strong, England can comfortably fight with its opponents without worrying about the fall of its homeland. France and Germany have both fallen, but only England has remained standing in both world wars. In addition, once the steam engine era comes, England and the Ruhr area of Germany, which have rich coal resources, will become the most promising places. Because of coal, British steam warships are all over the world. Also because of coal, Germany dares to challenge the whole world alone. And poor France lacks both coal and oil. Later, it was forced to build nuclear power plants. The two great powers that rose in later generations, the United States and China, both have extremely rich coal resources. If there is not so much coal, how can we develop industry? Just like Brazil in later generations, it is also a great power, but it has iron but no coal. Therefore, they can only sell iron ore, and their industry has not improved. They can only be on the same level as India. As for India, they have coal and iron, but they always think of messy things in their minds and are unwilling to work properly. Otherwise, they will not be worse than China. Just when Marin was sitting alone in the office of the palace, daydreaming, emptying his mind, and why-whying randomly, his subordinates suddenly reported. Grand Duke, Captain Aben is back. Who? Marin did not react for a while. Captain Aben, the one without hair on his head. The guard reminded carefully, and seemed to be holding back a smile on his face. Oh, bald Aben. Marin remembered that it seemed that it was a Dutch youth who looked like Peter Pan Luo Lauhan. Like Luo Lauhan, he had a face full of premature aging. Although the two looked different, they both had shiny bald heads. Marin thought about it and it seemed that, he had sent Aben to explore the Panama Pacific route at the beginning of the year. According to the time, he should be back. After all, this exploration was very simple. Just start from Grenada and sail along the coastline of South America. Unlike Columbus's search for India before, it was necessary to cross the Indian Ocean. In the era without satellite navigation, crossing the ocean was very dangerous, especially the unknown ocean. Fortunately, Marin now has a sextant and a marine clock. By calculating the longitude and latitude, as long as you have walked the route once, you can continue to walk according to the original coordinates next time and you will not get lost. However, it must be very dangerous for people who cross the ocean for the first time. because there were no coordinates for him to refer to. But this time when Aben was looking for the Pacific coast of Panama, he sailed along the coastline of the South American continent. With the coast as a reference, it was much safer than crossing the ocean. Although it was his first time, it was much easier with the coastline as a comparison. What's more, Marin also drew the outline of the South American continent. All Aben had to do was to sail along the coast of the South American continent and refer to the outline. Sure enough, Aben's exploration route this time was indeed relatively smooth. With the coastline as a reference and the outline map of the South American continent, all Aben had to do was to record the longitude and latitude coordinates along the way. With these coordinates, the next time Aben went there, or if another captain was replaced, as long as he sailed strictly according to the instructions of the coordinates, it would be easy to find the destination. Aben was originally an uneducated fisherman who commanded a small fishing boat to go out to sea to fish. It stands to reason that such an uneducated young fisherman would have no chance to succeed. Unfortunately, when Marin was the lord of Texel Island, he was seriously lacking in talents, especially navigation talents. It just so happened that Aben left a deep impression on Marin, who made him similar to Luo Lauhan in characteristics, so he forced Aben to join his team and accept training from the old sailors hired from Portugal. Moreover, although Aben looked honest and had no cultural foundation, he was particularly talented in mathematics. Although he only studied for a few years, he learned simple angle calculations. And navigation requires calculating the latitude by calculating the angle of the sun. And calculate the longitude through the navigation clock and the height of the sun. Aben had a good talent for mathematics and quickly mastered this knowledge, so he stood out from the group of young fishermen and became a captain. He was fortunate to learn a lot about being a captain from Columbus. Last time Marin wanted Columbus to find the location of Panama City on the Pacific coast of Panama, Columbus didn't want to go, so he recommended Aben by the way, giving Aben a great opportunity. And Aben lived up to expectations, successfully found the Pacific coast of Panama, and returned to report to Marin. After getting permission to enter Marin's office, Aben respectfully presented the coordinates and hydrological data recorded during the voyage to Marin for reading. It can be seen that although Aben could not write any beautiful sentences in the logbook because of his lack of culture, he was still very careful in recording the nautical charts and coordinates. Marin only gave an outline map, and Aben not only copied this outline map, but also marked the coordinates of the coastal waterways in detail. Some inaccurate outlines were also modified. It can be said that as long as a few copies of this kind of nautical coordinate map are copied, the next captain who knows how to calculate longitude and latitude will easily reach the Pacific coast of Panama. Moreover, Marin had asked him to find an island off the coast of Chile as a transit station during the voyage, and Aben successfully found it. It was a small island in the sea near the Chilean city of Concepcion, in later generations Santa Maria Island, and marked the specific coordinates. Tell me, why did you choose this island? It seems that there are some coastal islands in the north, right? Marin asked after thinking about it. Yes, Grand Duke, if you go north, there are still several offshore islands. However, after I inspected those islands, I found that the climate of the coastal islands north of this island seems to be very dry. On those small islands, we can't find fresh water supplies, and it's meaningless to stop there. Only this small island, although not big, has a river on the island to provide fresh water, which can be used as an important transit point. Marin nodded, and he also remembered that the northern part of Chile is indeed very dry. It seems that it is affected by the Peruvian cold current. Although a huge fishing ground has been formed, it has caused a huge drought effect on the northern coast of Chile and the southwestern coast of Peru. The central and southern coasts of Chile have a relatively humid climate and rivers to provide fresh water. However, at present, it is the sphere of influence of the Inca Empire. Based on the principle of not conflicting with the indigenous people as much as possible when the foothold is not stable, Aben chose the isolated Santa Maria Island. You know, Chile can be regarded as the sphere of influence of the Inca Empire in this era. It is not impossible to force a landing, but it will definitely attract the attack of the Inca Empire. Therefore, it is very important to gain a support point on the outer sea continent now. The coastal areas of Peru to the north of Chile are more arid. For example, San Lorenzo Island, located off the coast of Lima, the capital of Peru in the future, opposite Callao, is an island with no fresh water. It seems that this is because of the Peruvian cold current. The sea areas where the cold current passes seem to be more arid. Further north, we reach the coast of Ecuador and Colombia. The islands here are not so dry. However, this place is not far from the Panama Bay, Marin's expected destination. Sure enough, Aben pointed at the map, pointed to several small islands in the Panama Bay, and explained to Marin. Oh. Chapter 733, The Plan to Build Panama City. Grand Duke, this is the Panama Bay you marked. I did find the Pearl Islands you marked, as well as Toboga Island and Tabajara Island. But I didn't find the Panama City you marked. Aben was a little confused. Marin smiled, of course you can't find it, it was my mistake to mark Panama City on the map. In fact, the Spaniards have not been to Panama, so where did Panama City come from? However, building a city at the location of Panama City is a plan that must be implemented. With Panama City, it will be beneficial to the invasion of the Inca Empire of Peru and the Trans-Pacific trade with the Ming dynasty. Among them, the Trans-Pacific trade with the Ming dynasty is currently the most important. Aben continued. Although I didn't find Panama City, I asked near the coast and found a place called Gama in a seaside fishing village more than 10 kilometers northeast of Toboga Island. But, it seems to be a small fishing village. That's right, fishing village. Marin interrupted Aben. So, Aben, you have discovered this small fishing village called Panama, and you have completed your mission. I plan to send you with a fleet to occupy this fishing village called Panama and build a castle there, how about that? Ah. But, I only know how to sail. Bald Aben was a little entangled. It doesn't matter, I will send someone who knows how to build a castle to assist you. Your task is to organize people to build a dock locally. In the future, this will become an important base for shipbuilding and repairing ships. As for other matters related to building a city and developing the local area, I will arrange a deputy to solve them for you. When Gorad's people have opened up the road to here, all matters will be solved by him, and you can return home. This. Aben hesitated. After all, he was not good at running a colony. If you get it done, I will give you a hereditary knight's title. Okay, I'll do it. Aben agreed without any hesitation. Aben's current merits are barely enough to be canonized as a knight. However, he is just an ordinary knight. After his death, his descendants cannot inherit the title. And Aben already has a 1.5-year-old son. If he can get this hereditary knight title, then his son will definitely be a nobleman in the future, and so will his descendants. This deal is very worthwhile. Besides, Aben only needs to be responsible for operating the routes and docks, and other things will be handled by professionals, which is very much in line with his wishes. So, is there a place suitable for building a dock near that small fishing village? Marin asked with concern. You know, the ships of this era are all wooden ships. Wooden ships are afraid of being corroded by sea maggots, and sea maggots can only live in seawater areas, but are afraid of freshwater areas. Once a ship enters a freshwater area, the sea maggots attach to the bottom of the ship and gnawing at the hull will leave on their own. Therefore, in this era, many excellent ports in later generations are not suitable. Only the estuaries of freshwater rivers are excellent ports. Aben thought about it, and after trying to recall for a long time, he said. There is a river next to that small fishing village, but it is not big. The river estuary is good for building a small dock, but it is not enough for building a large dock. Then change the place. Is there a larger river estuary nearby? It is best to have its own harbor. Yes, there is a larger river estuary a few kilometers east of that small fishing village. It may be more suitable to build a dock and dock there. Aben said after thinking about it. Okay, let's do it, build Panama City there. In this way, the address of Panama City, at Aben's suggestion, was moved a few kilometers east from the original location of the ancient city of Panama in history. However, this did not have any impact. Anyway, Marin did not have the ability to dig the Panama Canal for the time being. All he wanted was to build a rural cement road from Cologne to Panama City. And moving Panama City a few kilometers east would not have much impact. Because the matter was too important, it affected the trade routes with the Ming dynasty and the future control of Peru and Chile. For this reason, Marin temporarily put aside all other matters and began to help Aben select assistants. The construction of Panama City naturally requires a person who is proficient in architecture. So Marin found an architect named Storm and appointed him as the deputy city lord of Panama City, in charge of the construction of Panama City. Because there are tropical rainforests around Panama City, it is too difficult to collect stones from the rainforest. Because the matter was too important, it affected the trade routes with the Ming dynasty and the future control of Peru and Chile. For this reason, Marin temporarily put aside all other matters and began to help Aben select assistants. The construction of Panama City naturally requires a person who is proficient in architecture. So Marin found an architect named Storm and appointed him as the deputy city lord of Panama City, in charge of the construction of Panama City. Because there are tropical rainforests around Panama City, it is too difficult to collect stones from the rainforest to build the city. Therefore, Marin simply planned to send a few ships to carry bricks and cement. When he got there, he directly used the bricks and cement he brought with him to build a small city wall courtyard. Then, the buildings in the city wall were slowly built. Panama City actually serves the port for trade with the Ming dynasty. Therefore, this small city must have been built on the bank of that big river. Storm was mainly responsible for the construction of the city. Presumably, with a few ships of bricks and cement, it would not be a problem to build a fortress that could accommodate hundreds of people. What? You said that the fortress that can only accommodate a few hundred people is too small. Don't worry, this is only for emergency use. After all, when Panama was first built, the population must not be large, and it was necessary to guard against attacks by indigenous people. Therefore, it is the most correct choice to quickly build a fortress that can accommodate hundreds of people. As for the fortress being too small, can't it be expanded later when there are enough bricks and cement? In addition, the focus is on the construction of ports and docks. For this reason, Marin selected several supervisors from the Emden shipyard and followed Aben to Panama City to be responsible for the construction of docks and long bridge docks. In addition, they will also bring 300 craftsmen with them to be responsible for the manufacture and maintenance of ships. Of course, this is only the first batch of craftsmen, and there will be more people going there in the future. However, Marin is now short of shipbuilding craftsmen, so he can only send 300 to build a straw team. In order to solve the problem of the lack of shipbuilding craftsmen, Marin has imitated the captain's school and specially established a shipbuilding technical school to recruit young people who are willing to be craftsmen. Then, after a round of selection, some of those who were too clumsy were eliminated, leaving those young people with more flexible hands and feet for further technical training. Their training method was also very simple and crude, starting with a small canoe, and then switching to a small fishing boat. After the small fishing boat was built, they tried to build a large fishing boat. A fishing boat over 50 tons could be called a large fishing boat in this era. The large fishing boat could be built well. Well, if it was qualified, it would be sent to the shipyard. At present, the shipbuilding technical school is training 1,500 young craftsmen. However, due to the tight time, it is estimated that it will take another 1 or 2 years for these people to basically graduate and then be sent to shipyards in Emden and North America. In addition to shipbuilding talents, Marin also selected several agricultural talents to be responsible for growing food and fruits outside Panama City. After all, it is too costly to transport food from the mainland. It would be best if we could grow food on a large scale locally and be self-sufficient in advance. Considering the local hot and humid climate, it is not suitable to grow rye. Therefore, planting Indian rice and bananas outside Panama City is the best choice. Of course, there is also the magical crop of America, sweet potato. This is definitely the best way to fight hunger. Kong Matsi relied on sweet potato to become the emperor of all ages. In addition to growing food, Marin also plans to have people plant wormwood and pyrethrum on a large scale near Panama City to isolate those terrible Panamanian mosquitoes. Of course, people have to cut down those damn trees first. You know, those mosquitoes hide in the woods and bushes by the water during the day. Therefore, Marin planned to buy another 1,000 black slaves from Jorge de Rencaster, the Duke of Coimbra, in Portugal. Then, let those black uncles take saws and saw down all the trees outside Panama City. At the same time, pull out all the shrubs by the river. In this way, it is difficult for the poisonous mosquitoes near Panama City to find a place to hide, and they can only be killed by the scorching sun during the day. In addition, Marin will also supply a large number of homemade mosquito coils to Panama City. The so-called homemade mosquito coils are to crush pyrethrum and wormwood, add a small amount of yellow mud, and knead them into strips. Then, make an incense burner specifically for lighting mosquito coils, fumigating mosquitoes, and protecting the lives of colonists. After all, the poisonous mosquitoes in Panama are too deadly, and a bite may kill you. This homemade mosquito coil, Marin tried it himself, and the effect is very good, no less than modern mosquito coils. Moreover, the toxicity is not great. Unlike the mosquito coils of later generations, chemical poisons are used to endanger human health. Of course, pyrethrum is toxic after all, so children, especially babies, should use it with caution. Pure wormwood mosquito coils, on the other hand, are less effective and smell more, but they are guaranteed to be healthy. As for why mosquito coils are not made into the disc shape of later generations, but into simple and crude long strips, it is because a special mosquito coil disc is needed to make a disc shape, which is very troublesome. It is very easy to make it into a long strip. You can light it with any earthen incense burner, or even a bowl. It is not troublesome at all, and it is in line with the principle of simple and crude. Finally, it is a safety issue. For this reason, Marin specially selected 200 militiamen to protect this new port city. In order to enhance their combat effectiveness, Marin specially provided them with 200 clockwork ignition rifles. Panama City belongs to the tropical rainforest climate, and matchlock guns are easy to extinguish there. Therefore, it is most appropriate to use a clockwork ignition gun that is not afraid of rain. With the support of concrete walls and 200 clockwork ignition guns. Even though the combat effectiveness of these militias is far inferior to that of regular troops, they can defend Panama City and repel the attacks of the indigenous people without any problems. Chapter 734 Columbus's Journey to Malacca. While Marin was busy preparing for the expedition to Panama City, Columbus's fleet also arrived at the Malacca Sultanate in the Strait of Malacca, and visited the Malacca Sultan Mahmud Shah. Originally, the Malacca Sultan disdained to meet Columbus, a foreign merchant. Malacca had embraced the thigh of the Ming dynasty, and some other countries were regarded as barbarians. However, Columbus said, "I will give you a batch of muskets and artillery," and Mahmud Sultan immediately changed his face and welcomed Columbus into the palace as a VIP. You know, since the Malacca Sultan had embraced the thick thigh of the Ming dynasty, he naturally admired everything about the Ming dynasty. The Ming army attached great importance to firearms, and the Malacca people also wanted to learn. However, for the Ming Empire, firearms were strictly controlled, and it was unlikely for a small barbarian country like the Malacca Sultanate to obtain firearms strictly controlled by the Ming dynasty. Before the Europeans who sold firearms casually arrived in Southeast Asia, it was almost impossible for small Southeast Asian countries to obtain firearms. The Portuguese had not come yet, so the people of Malacca naturally could not get the firearms they had admired for a long time. Especially the cannons. According to the description of the top students in Malacca who had been to the Ming dynasty, once the cannons were fired, they were earth-shaking, like thunder, and amazing. Therefore, Sultan Mahmud may not have any idea about the matchlock guns, but he was very yearning for the cannons. When he heard that Columbus was going to give him cannons, he decisively treated Columbus as a guest of honor. And Columbus went from being a passerby to a guest of honor in Malacca, just because he said, "I want to send a few cannons." In fact, Marin planned to provide the Malacca Sultanate with 20 French rear-loading bronze cannons and 200 obsolete matchlock guns. With these weapons, the Malacca Sultanate could hold out for a long time when facing the attack of the Portuguese army. However, what Marin never expected was that Columbus was corrupt. He embezzled half of the 20 bronze cannons and 200 matchlock guns that were originally intended to be given to Malacca. In the end, the Sultan of Malacca only received 10 French bronze cannons and 100 matchlock guns. But even these were enough for Mahmud Sultan to treat Columbus as a master. Because the value of this batch of guns and cannons was indeed amazing. What's more, Columbus also moved a lot of gunpowder barrels from the ship and gave them to Mahmud Sultan. Not only that, Columbus also told Mahmud Sultan the formula of gunpowder. In later generations, any middle school student knew the formula of gunpowder, but in this era, in Southeast Asia where firearms were not popular, it was a secret. Columbus not only told Mahmud Sultan the ratio of gunpowder, but also instructed the Sultan to send people to India to buy saltpeter and sulfur. As for charcoal, the Malacca Sultanate had no shortage of this stuff. In addition, Columbus also asked his men to demonstrate to the soldiers of Malacca how to use a bullet maker to make lead bullets from molten lead. Seeing Columbus so powerful, Sultan Mahmud was naturally not stingy and treated Columbus as a foreign head of state. Not only did he provide Columbus with good food and drink, but he also let Columbus pick any beautiful woman he wanted. However, what no one expected was that Columbus had a heavy taste in picking beautiful women. He didn't want mature and sexy beauties, nor did he want young and immature girls, but he wanted a few 10-year-old girls. Yes. Columbus was a perverted loyalty control. As early as when he discovered America, Columbus, this bastard, had kidnapped little Indian girls. Moreover, he especially liked to rape girls aged 9 to 10. So, when Sultan Mahmud wanted to send a few beautiful women to Columbus, Columbus decisively asked for 5 10-year-old girls. After the girls were violently destroyed by Columbus, they naturally couldn't recover the next day. So, Columbus asked for 5 girls at once, and took turns to rape them every day. After the 5th day, the first girl he raped recovered and could be abused again. In this way, Columbus began his perverted career of SM little girls in the guest room of the palace of the Malacca Sultanate. It was not until the soldiers and craftsmen sent by the Malacca Sultanate learned how to use muskets, cannons, and how to configure gunpowder from Columbus's men that Columbus left the guest room with a sense of unsatisfaction. During this period, as many as 20 Malacca girls were tortured by Columbus, the pervert. Originally, he had taught the Malacca people how to use firearms and how to configure gunpowder, and Columbus could continue to set off for the Ming dynasty. However, Columbus had not had enough fun. So, in order to show his value and let Sultan Mahmud send more girls to him for SM, Columbus began to brag to Sultan Mahmud. Of course, Columbus was not talking nonsense. He told Sultan Mahmud that the Malacca kingdom was a country with very rich tin reserves. If it is well developed and utilized, Sultan Mahmud will definitely become a wealthy monarch. These words were told to Columbus by Marin before Columbus set off. Of course, this was just Marin's casual chat with Columbus, and he did not ask Columbus to tell the Malacca Sultan. But at this moment, in order to maintain his perverted needs and let the Malacca Sultanate continue to treat him as a guest of honor, Columbus shamelessly began to brag. The Malacca Kingdom is located on the Malay Peninsula, which is indeed a region with extremely rich tin reserves in the world. In the 11 states of the Malay Peninsula, West Malaysia, in later Malaysia, 9 states have rich tin mines. Even Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia in later generations, was developed because of the mining of a large tin mine. Coincidentally, before departure, Marin talked about the Kuala Lumpur tin mine. Out of curiosity, Columbus asked about the location of Kuala Lumpur. Marin happened to remember the location of the famous city of Kuala Lumpur, so he mentioned it casually, not far from the north of Malacca City, about 100 kilometers, the confluence of the Klang River and the Gombak River. So Columbus remembered it. Now, Columbus just wanted to continue to be a master, so he pretended to be a master and instructed Sultan Mahmud. Sure enough, Sultan Mahmud was very excited when he heard the news that there was a large tin mine in the country. For this reason, he immediately sent someone to find a tinsmith to help find the legendary large tin mine at the confluence of the 2 rivers. Columbus bit the bullet and took a group of tinsmiths to the confluence of the Gombak River and the Klang River. Unfortunately, this group of tinsmiths were craftsmen who made tinware with ready-made tin, and they were not very good at finding mines. At most, they barely knew tin ore. It took them several days to finally find the huge tin mine in Kuala Lumpur. After an estimate, it was indeed a super large mine. According to the estimates of those half-baked tinsmiths, at least several million caddies of tin metal can be smelted. In fact, this is the number estimated by these tinsmiths with poor skills and serious underestimation. 1 million caddies is only 500 tons. The big tin mine in Kuala Lumpur has been mined for more than 100 years, and there are at least tens of thousands of tons of tin metal. Maybe it is underestimated, otherwise a big city like Kuala Lumpur cannot be built, which is more than 100 times the estimated number of tinsmiths. Moreover, this is a rich mine. Despite this, Sultan Mahmud was still very happy. In the Ming dynasty, a caddy of tin is worth 81, which is close to the price of cooked copper. Millions of caddies of tin metal. Sultan Mahmud was very happy. When the Sultan was happy, Columbus was rewarded with dozens of pretty girls. However, the Malays are not good at smelting tin metal. Therefore, the Sultan decided to send people to Guangzhou with Columbus to pay tribute, and by the way, asked the Ming dynasty to support a group of craftsmen who smelted tin metals, as well as smelting equipment for tin metals. In this way, Columbus had to embark on the journey to Guangzhou, Ming dynasty. But before boarding the ship, he took all the girls that the Sultan rewarded him with on board. Even those girls that he was tired of playing with would be rewarded by Columbus to the sailors to play with. 735, Spanish-Portuguese Alliance and Fleet. Sultan Mahmud did not know that the discovery of the Kuala Lumpur tin mine did not bring him wealth and happiness, but brought him disaster. The batch of muskets and artillery given to him by Marin did repel a Portuguese attack. However, because of the development and fame of the Kuala Lumpur tin mine, the Portuguese's desire to capture the Malacca Sultanate became stronger. In the end, the Malacca kingdom was still taken down by the Portuguese. Of course, this is a later story. Although Columbus was perverted, he also helped Marin unintentionally. Why? If the Portuguese had discovered that Malacca had a stronger firepower earlier, they might not have attacked the Malacca Sultanate again. However, the existence of the Kuala Lumpur super tin mine made the Portuguese salivate. Therefore, Portugal eventually captured the Malacca Sultanate. Because tin mines are strategic resources in Europe. After all, tin metal is an important component in casting bronze cannons. Tin mines are scarce in Europe. How could the greedy Portuguese let go of such a large tin mine in Kuala Lumpur? However, it was in Marin's interest for Portugal to capture the Malacca kingdom. Why? Because Malacca was a vassal of the Ming dynasty. It would be strange for the Ming dynasty to allow Portugal to trade after the vassal was destroyed by the Portuguese. Of course, the Portuguese did not lose too much. Although they lost the trade qualification of the Ming dynasty, the Kuala Lumpur super tin mine can indeed bring them huge benefits. You know, due to the shortage of tin ore, the price of tin ore in Europe is not even lower than that of copper ore. It was not. Until he got on the ship that Columbus remembered that he seemed to have forgotten one of Marin's instructions to warn the Malacca Sultanate and remind them to be careful of Portugal. Fortunately, Sultan Mahmud sent envoys with Columbus's fleet to Guangzhou, Ming dynasty, to pay tribute to Ming dynasty and ask for craftsmen who smelted tin metal. So Columbus invited the Malacca envoys and repeatedly emphasized to them through an Arabic translator, Malacca is a Muslim country, so they naturally understand Arabic, otherwise how can they read the scriptures, that if an evil country called Portugal occupied the Malacca royal city one day, please be sure to send envoys to Ming dynasty for help. The Malacca envoy looked at Columbus as if he were a madman, thinking that Columbus had slept with too many girls and had become mentally ill. However, he did write down this reminder. Many years later, when Malacca was really conquered by Portugal, he immediately remembered Columbus's reminder and went to the Ming dynasty for help. This also avoided the original history of sending people to the Ming dynasty for help after many years. Of course, this request for help was in vain. Because it was unlikely that the Ming dynasty would send troops to fight the Portuguese in the South Seas. However, it led to a falling out between the Ming dynasty and the Portuguese. In the end, the one who benefited was actually Marin. However, it is too early to say this now. Why? Because the Portuguese have no time to take care of the Strait of Malacca. Because, at this stage, Portugal's biggest task is to unite with Spain to squeeze Venice out of the Indian spice trade. Then, Spain and Portugal divided the European spice trade market. So, when the scum navigator Columbus took a group of girls to Guangzhou, the Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet was intercepting all spice merchant ships that did not belong to Spain and Portugal in the Arabian Sea of the Indian Ocean. This joint fleet, composed of 27 large warships of more than 200 tons, was rampant in the Arabian Sea, intercepting any ship they saw. If they found spices on board, they would confiscate them all. Of course, other property was also looted. If anyone dared not to stop the ship for inspection, they would be sunk with artillery. It can be said that this Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet was a group of sea robbers. Although it was in the name of inspection, almost no ship was spared as long as they were intercepted. If you don't resist, it's okay, they will rob you of your goods and money, and then let you go with an empty ship. If you dare to resist, you will either sink the ship directly or jump off the ship to help seize the ship through a boarding battle. By then, the captives will not be spared, they will be put into sacks and thrown into the sea to feed the fish. In fact, the Spaniards and Portuguese knew very well that their main competitors in the spice trade were Venice and the Venetians' partners, the Egyptians. Of course, there were also some merchant ships from other Arab countries, including some local Indian merchant ships. It's just that they were warned by Marin. Therefore, at this time, there were no merchant ships of Venetian merchants in the Indian Ocean. Because they were afraid of being looted by Spanish and Portuguese warships, and they were determined to dig the Suez Canal, the Venetians simply disposed of all merchant ships in the Indian Ocean and concentrated on digging the canal. Of course, the Venetians also thought of other ways. For example, they wanted to go by land and continue to get some spices back to Europe to sell. The route originally chosen by the Venetians was through northern India, then enter Persia by land, and then transport it to Azerbaijan in northern Persia to arrive at the Black Sea port. The Venetian navy can reach out to the Black Sea. At least, in this era, the Ottoman Turkish navy cannot be compared with the Venetian navy. Although the cost of land transportation may be much higher than that of sea transportation. However, considering that spices are precious materials, it is not a loss to go by land. At most of the profits will be lost, but there is still profit. But the problem is that the situation in Persia is now unstable and it is in the midst of a civil war. The newly emerging Safavid dynasty is launching a civil war to eliminate the White Sheep dynasty that it destroyed. Therefore, the situation in Persia is now very chaotic. Moreover, the founder of the Safavid dynasty, the 19-year-old Shah, equivalent to the king, Ismail I, was in high spirits at this time. Because he was invincible, the young Shah did not take others seriously. The delegation sent by Venice to Persia was directly expelled by Ismail I on the grounds that Persia does not deal with pagans, and he was not even given a chance to negotiate. In fact, this was because Ismail I had never suffered any loss and was currently inflated. How could he take the heroes of the world seriously? It was not until he occupied Iraq and failed to compete with the powerful Ottoman Turkey and was severely beaten that Ismail I would recognize the reality and then take the initiative to contact Venice and other European countries to fight against Turkey together. But now, the young Shah has not suffered from the Turkish-European steamroller and is still arrogant. In desperation, Venice had to give up the land plan and endure it first, and wait until the Suez Canal is dug, and then fight with Spain and Portugal. However, Venice did withdraw in advance, but Venice's trading partner Egypt was in trouble. Most of the merchant ships carrying spices looted by the Spanish-Portuguese coalition and fleet were ships of the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt. The spice trade was an important source of tax revenue for Egypt. The Mamluk dynasty of Egypt had lived a very comfortable life by personally participating in the spice trade and levying taxes on Venetian spice merchants. But the actions of the Spanish-Portuguese coalition and fleet directly violated Egypt's interests. In addition, during the sweep of the Spanish-Portuguese coalition and fleet, other Arab merchants, including merchants from Ottoman Turkey and Oman, as well as merchant ships from some states such as Calicut in India, were attacked to varying degrees by the Spanish-Portuguese coalition and fleet. So, a kind of anger spread among these countries. Chapter 736. The ending is already destined. As a result, the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt and some princes in India, including the Ottoman Empire, began to connect and plan to deal with this arrogant Spanish-Portuguese coalition and fleet together. But strangely, Venice, whose interests were most damaged, was somewhat silent and continued to dig the canal. The Egyptians found the Venetian representatives and asked them to join the action against the Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet, but were rejected. The Venetians' reason was that because the Venetian warships could not enter the Red Sea, they could not compete with the Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet. Want revenge? Wait until we finish digging the canal, and then blow up the ship and pile them to death. In fact, the Venetians did think so. And they did it. The reason for this is that Venice is afraid that if it gets involved in the dispute too early, it will not only fail to hit Spain and Portugal, but will also cause war with Spain and Portugal. Although Venice may not be afraid of Spain and Portugal, it is afraid that the other party will interfere with Venice's digging of the Suez Canal. The earlier the Suez Canal is opened, the earlier it can produce benefits. Therefore, for Venice, it is the best choice to be patient and wait for the future. Of course, Venice is also happy to see Spain and Portugal suffer. To this end, the Venetian parliament specially approved 300,000 ducats of gold coins to support the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt, support the Egyptians to buy ships and recruit people, expand their maritime strength, and fight with Spain and Portugal. In any case, it will cause some trouble to these two countries. Marin was busy preparing manpower and materials to build Panama City, so he naturally didn't know what was happening in the Indian Ocean. However, even if he knew, Marin would directly judge that the Spanish-Portuguese coalition would win. Why? This has been proven by history. In the original history, in the Battle of Dio that broke out in 1509, the Portuguese relied on 18 ships and 1,800 sailors to defeat the coalition's 2,000 ships and more than 20,000 sailors. And this Spanish-Portuguese coalition fleet is more powerful than the original Portuguese fleet in history. Although there are only 8 more ships, they are all large ships. The original Portuguese fleet in the Battle of Joe consisted of 5 large caravels, 4 small caravels, 6 caravels, and 3 small boats. Not only that, influenced by Marin's naval warfare ideas, the Spanish fleet was generally equipped with a large number of rear-loading bronze cannons, that is, falconets, with a caliber mainly of 6-pound cannons and 3-pound cannons, and a small number of 10-pound heavy cannons. Maybe the caliber is not very large, but it also depends on what the opponent is like. The Egyptians' action was strongly supported by the Ottoman Turkey. Why? Because the maritime actions of Spain and Portugal affected Turkey's maritime timber transportation. Most of the areas controlled by Turkey are relatively arid areas with less timber. Therefore, they rely more on importing high-quality timber from India and Southeast Asia. Even the Turkish naval fleet, which is still being formed, mainly comes from India and Southeast Asia. However, the Spanish-Portuguese alliance and the fleet's dominance in the Arabian Sea have seriously affected the Ottoman Turkey's acquisition of timber. Therefore, in order to combat the arrogance of Spain and Portugal, the Ottoman Turkey was willing to take the initiative to provide Egypt with a number of large Mediterranean-style rowing warships and Greek sailors for combat. Greece is currently occupied by Turkey, and the people are also driven by Turkey. However, in the absence of the opening of the Suez Canal, how to transport these rowing warships to the Red Sea is a difficult problem. So the Venetians took the initiative to stand up. We will help you dismantle the ships, and then send them to the Red Sea coast south of the Sinai Peninsula to reassemble them. To this end, the Venetians urgently mobilized a large number of shipbuilding craftsmen from their homeland. But the problem is that these Mediterranean-style rowing warships provided by the Turks can only be equipped with a small number of cannons at the bow and stern. As for the side, because of the need for rowing, cannons cannot be installed. Therefore, the several large ships sent by the Turks to Egypt are not actually strong in naval warfare. However, neither the Egyptians nor the Turks know that the times have changed. They are still stuck in the old-fashioned naval warfare thinking of boarding battles where people jump on boats and chop each other, and they don't know that artillery battles have risen. Therefore, before this naval battle was fought, the Egyptians were doomed to fail. Because the ships of the Egyptian fleet are either large Mediterranean-style rowing boats or single-masted Arab triangular sailing ships. The former can only be equipped with a small number of cannons at both ends of the bow and stern, while the latter cannot be equipped with cannons at all. As a result, bow and arrow shooting became the main attack method of this fleet. The fleet of the Indian ally of the Egyptians was about the same level, or even worse. Although the large rowing warships provided by Turkey were not powerful enough, they were relatively durable. But those small single-masted Arab triangular sailing ships were really not durable. Even if the main guns of the Spanish and Portuguese fleets were 6-pound rear-loading bronze cannons, they were enough to deal with these small Arab single-masted triangular capsized ships. As for those more durable Turkish ships, there were too few of them and their attack power was too poor, so they could not control the occupation at all. The Venetians, who were supposed to actively participate in the war, were reminded by Marin and clearly realized the gap between the two sides at the strategic and tactical level. However, the Venetians did not intend to remind the Egyptians. Why? Because the Venetians did not want to see Egypt become strong at sea. In the Venetian plan, once the Suez Canal was opened, it would be the time for Venice to dominate or even monopolize the Indian Ocean. But Egypt was an ally, and Venice could not destroy the Egyptians' maritime power by itself. Therefore, letting Spain and Portugal destroy Egypt's maritime power is the best outcome for the Venetians. Moreover, once the maritime power is destroyed, the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt will rely more on the Venetians. Even more support will be provided for the excavation of Venice's canals. Because the Mamluk certainly hope that Venice can help them get revenge. So, although the Venetians pay money and help dismantle and assemble ships, they are actually hoping that Egypt will lose as badly as possible in their hearts. In the camp against Spain and Portugal, Venice, the strongest, is burying its head in the water and working without effort, while Turkey only provides a few old ships. The remaining princes of Egypt and India are weak in strength and backward in tactical thinking. Therefore, this naval battle has not started yet, but the ending has long been doomed. But no matter what, some princes of Egypt and India will not be willing to withdraw from the stage of history. Therefore, they will make a final struggle in an attempt to get a turnaround. After all, no one is willing to give up the huge fat meat of the spice trade. For the sake of profit, everyone will eventually fight. No one wants to quit easily until the end. Chapter 737, Upper Edge Sail and Stabilizer Fin, Part 1, In the Indian Ocean, the clouds of war are approaching. Several princes in Egypt and India are preparing to defeat the Spanish-Portuguese coalition and fleet. However, India is not united. For example, the port of Calicut joined the camp against the Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet because of the serious damage to the trade of the Kingdom of Calicut by the joint fleet of Spain and Portugal, and prohibited the merchant ships of the two countries from docking at the port of Calicut. However, just as Calicut rejected Spain and Portugal, the Prince of the Cochin state, who had always been jealous of Calicut's status as the largest trading port in India, immediately hooked up with Spain and Portugal, expressing his willingness to trade with the two countries and become a trading port for Indian spice exports. Moreover, the warships of the two countries were allowed to dock for supplies. Originally, the Zamarin, the title of the prince of the princely state of Calicut, had united a large number of Indian princes of coastal states to prepare to ban the pirates of Spain and Portugal. However, in order to replace Calicut's status as a spice trading port and obtain huge tax revenues, the Prince of Cochin took the initiative to surrender to Spain and Portugal and acted as a guide. There are many places where Indian pepper is produced, not just in the state of Calicut. And those pepper suppliers don't care whether they ship in the port of Calicut or in Cochin. For them, except for the local pepper merchants in the small state of Calicut, other pepper merchants will sell to whoever pays. As for Ceylon, Sri Lanka, that provides cinnamon, and Southeast Asian merchants who provide cloves and cinnamon, they don't care even more. Anyway, Calicut and Cochin are both ports on the southwest coast of India. Where these spice merchants do business in the end depends on the outcome of the final naval battle. If the Spanish-Portuguese coalition wins, then the spice trade center is likely to move to Cochin. Of course, if the Spanish-Portuguese coalition conquers Calicut, it may still be in Calicut, but the controllers will become Spain and Portugal. If the coalition wins, needless to say, the spice trade center is still in Calicut, and the controller is still the Zamerlin family. Therefore, whether Calicut will continue to be the spice distribution center of India in the future, or Cochin will replace it, all depends on the outcome of the next maritime battle. However, because both sides of the war need a lot of time to prepare. Therefore, if they want to fight, they have to wait until at least next year. Marin has no time to care about the disputes in the Indian Ocean now. Even if he does, it is useless. Because he does not have the energy and strength to intervene there. It is said that in order to completely dominate the spice trade in the Indian Ocean, Spain and Portugal may increase the number of warships from 27 to 40. Moreover, they are all large caravels. These are all professional warships, and the rest of the caravels that can transport goods and assist in combat are not counted. Marin has no mind to care about India. What he is worried about now is the control of the Americas. During this period, he prepared a large number of ships and materials, as well as related talents, ready to send Aben to Panama to build a city and establish an excellent freshwater port. However, Aben told Marin that it was not so easy to go to Panama City by sea. The other sections were fine, but the Strait of Tierra del Fuego at the southernmost tip of South America was a very dangerous sailing section. The channel there was narrow, and ships could easily run aground or hit a reef if they were not careful. Moreover, in the process of entering the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean, there would be a strong westerly wind. Therefore, when sailing through the curved strait that Marin inexplicably named the Strait of Magellan, it was very troublesome to control the sailboat. If you use a cross sail, it will not only be difficult to move forward against the wind, but it will also be easy to get into trouble, such as running aground or hitting a reef. Therefore, when passing through this strait, Aben and his ship used a triangular sail. According to the sailing habits learned from Columbus, Aben's ship also prepared two sets of sails, a cross sail and a triangular sail. When encountering a favorable wind, you naturally hang a cross sail to make full use of the wind. When encountering headwind and crosswind, you naturally have to change to a triangular sail. From Grenada, we sailed south along the east coast of South America, then passed through the Strait of Magellan and went north along the west coast of South America. The wind belts changed many times during this period, and the wind direction was very unstable. Therefore, starting from Grenada, Aben's ship used triangular sails most of the time. But this large triangular sail, which Europeans called Latin sail, is very troublesome to operate. First of all, it should be explained here that a crossbar is often tied to the mast of a sailboat. And this crossbar mainly serves as the supporting skeleton of the sail. Otherwise, the sail cannot be unfolded. In a square-rigged sailboat, the crossbar is naturally fixed to the mast. Moreover, it is tied horizontally to the mast in a perpendicular state to the mast. The sail hanging from the crossbar is a square sail. The Latin sail is different from the large triangular sail. It also has a crossbar to tie a huge triangular sail. However, this crossbar is not fixed, but adjustable. You can see the pictures of Arab triangular sails or cogs hanging triangular sails. In fact, the Latin sail was made by sailors in the Mediterranean Sea of Europe who learned the triangular sail technology from the Arabs. However, the adjustment of the Latin sail is also very troublesome. Every time the wind direction changes after turning the rudder, the triangular sail must also change its position and continue to drive in another direction. It should be pointed out that this crossbar tied to the mast is called a sailing spar. On a square-rigged sailing ship, because the sailing spar is tied straight, it is naturally straight. However, on a schooner, that is, a triangular sailing ship using a Latin sail, the sailing spar is tied to the mast diagonally. Therefore, it is called a diagonal spar. Moreover, in order to drive the ship forward, the diagonal spar is generally tied in such a way that the lower end is tied in front of the mast, and the higher end is tied behind the mast. Then, the triangular tip of the triangular sail is tied by the sailor to the left or right side of the ship, depending on the wind direction. In this way, when the triangular sail is hit by the side wind, it will swell up for driving. Then, the wind is transmitted to the gaff and then to the mast, driving the boat forward. However, the direction change of this large triangular sail is more troublesome. After turning the rudder or the wind suddenly changes direction, in order to change direction and continue sailing, the sailor must first untie the rope of the triangular tip of the triangular sail that was previously fixed, and put the triangular sail on the gaff. Then, untie the fixed rope of the gaff, first stand up the gaff, and then pass it through the mast and go around to the other side of the mast. Then, let go of the sail and retie the triangular tip to take advantage of the wind on the other side. However, this operation is too troublesome and time-consuming. If it is on the wide ocean, it is naturally nothing, at most it will take a little more time. But if it is in a narrow strait with strong winds and high waves, this can be fatal. You are slowly operating the triangular sail there, but time waits for no one. If you are not careful, when the sailors are busy changing direction, the ship is pushed to the shoal by the wind and waves and runs aground or simply hits the reef, then it's over. So, for safety reasons, it's better to have a way to quickly change the direction of the Latin mainsail. Then, Marin remembered the upper edge girder sail of later generations. In later generations, almost all modern sailboats use upper edge girder triangular sails. Why? This is not because this kind of sail has the strongest wind-driving ability. Rather, this kind of upper edge girder sail is the easiest to operate and saves a lot of manpower. You know, times are different, and modern people are so expensive. If you hire one more sailor, the boss may go bankrupt. So, this kind of upper edge girder sail that saves sailors came into being. Marin heard in later generations that a super large clipper sailboat called Wyoming was equipped with 6 masts and an average speed of 16 knots. However, the sailors who control the sails only need 14 people, it saves too much salary. Marin burst into tears when he thought of this. The small broken ship of more than 100 tons that Columbus used to explore the New World required 40 sailors to handle. The 250-level armed merchant ship that Marin is using now also requires 50 or 60 sailors. The Wyoming clipper with a displacement of tens of thousands of tons only requires 14 sailors to operate. How much manpower can be saved? Although it is said that manpower is not valuable in this era. Unlike workers in later generations, NEMA has to give 5 insurances and 1 fund in addition to salary. However, if each ship requires fewer people and the number of people remains unchanged, more ships can be controlled. Is Marin short of ships? For the time being, there is a shortage. But there will be no shortage soon. Because many of the oaks cut down by Marin in the colonies of America have been air-dried for more than 2 years and can be used for large-scale shipbuilding. However, there is no large-scale explosion of ships due to the current limitation of the number of shipbuilding craftsmen. But Marin has established a shipbuilding technical school and began to train shipbuilding craftsmen on a large scale. As long as there are enough shipbuilding craftsmen and there are countless wood resources in America, the ship can be expected to explode. However, if there are not enough sailors at that time, it will be embarrassing. Therefore, for Marin, saving manpower to operate the sailboat is also very important. Chapter 738, Upper Edge Sail and Stabilizer Fin, Part 2. The gaff sail is the highest technological achievement of sail power, but it was born at the wrong time. When the gaff sail reached its peak, it was already the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. By this time, steam engine technology had long been mature, and even steam turbines had appeared. The gaff sail was mainly used on clippers in the early 20th century. After all, sail power does not require coal, which is very economical and can save cargo space. In addition, the speed of the clipper ship was no slower than that of an ordinary steam engine merchant ship in the early 20th century. However, a series of accidents that occurred later cast a shadow on the sailing ship. Coupled with the emergence of more advanced and efficient diesel engines, the clipper ship driven by the gaff sail eventually withdrew from the stage of history. So, what kind of accident was it? It turns out that of the 10 six-masted and above schooner sailboats, clippers with gaff sails, built in the early 20th century, several sank, including the unlucky 10,000-ton clipper, Wyoming, mentioned earlier. Then, people were frightened by the high accident rate and eventually gave up using clippers with gaff sails. But Marin has read history and knows that this is not really the fault of gaff sails. Rather, multi-masted gaff sails and clippers do not match. Why do you say that? Because Marin believes that clippers are too thin. Its length-to-width ratio of 6:1 or even higher makes the clipper hull extremely thin. The danger of a too thin ship is that it is easy to capsize. Just like a thin person can be easily pushed down or even blown down by the wind. The gaff sail is a longitudinal sail, which mostly borrows the side wind. But the side wind, while pushing the ship forward, will also push the sailboat to the side. If the wind is weak, it's okay, but if there is a big storm, the skinny clipper with up to 6 upper edge gaff sails and longitudinal sails will naturally capsize very easily. Moreover, this schooner 6-masted clipper has bad luck. Why? Because shortly after they withdrew from the stage of history, a technology called stabilizer fins appeared and was put into use. What are stabilizer fins? It is to install artificial shark fins on the underwater part of the hull so that the hull can ensure better balance. Modern warships are actually as skinny as clippers, and even more so. For example, the 052D destroyer is 157 meters long and 19 meters wide, with a length-to-width ratio of 8.26, and its speed is twice as fast as that of a clipper. But why don't modern warships capsize? Because they are all equipped with artificial shark fins, stabilizer fins. Moreover, there are not just one pair, but multiple pairs. In this way, even at a speed of more than 30 knots, modern warships are still as stable as those driven by an experienced driver. And the 6-masted clipper ship withdrew from the stage of history before the roll-stabilizing fin technology matured and was put into use, so it is a pity. If a few pairs of shark fins were installed, several of the 10 ships would not have sunk. Moreover, the upper edge gaff sail was not eliminated, but was retained by modern sailboats. However, most modern sailboats are small sailboats with single masts, mainly used for sailing. The modern sailboats that Marin had seen in his previous life basically used upper edge gaff sails, and then put a soft auxiliary sail in front to make full use of the wind. So, how did the upper edge gaff sail come from? Marin had read the history of navigation in his previous life, and it was introduced like this. The book said that in the 17th and 18th centuries, it was felt that the Latin mainsail was extremely inconvenient to operate when changing direction. In order to facilitate the rotation of the sail boom, people directly cut off the front half of the Latin sail's gaff, that is, the lower edge gaff. However, in this way, the Latin mainsail lost half of the side sail boom, and the area of the triangular sail was also reduced by half, and the ability to utilize wind power was greatly weakened. So people began to think of a way to make a wind-driving boom that can rotate around the mast at the bottom of the mast. The wind-driving boom is perpendicular to the mast and connected to the bottom of the mast with a metal ring. In this way, the sailor can directly pull the wind-driving boom in the horizontal direction by hand or rope. The retained upper edge gaff is also connected to the mast with a metal ring. However, unlike the wind-driving boom is perpendicular to the mast, while there is an angle between the upper edge gaff and the mast. The angle is still the same as when the lower edge gaff was retained before. The angle is upward and is still called the upper edge gaff. As for the sail, it is pulled between the wind-driving boom at the bottom and the upper edge gaff above. In this way, the shape of the sail surface becomes a rectangle with a right triangle on top. The area of a square with the same height and width is twice that of a triangle, so the area of this new type of upper edge gaff sail is no smaller than that of the Latin sail when the lower edge gaff is retained. What's more, a right-angled triangular sail can be added on top of the upper edge gaff to further increase the sail area and enhance the wind resistance. Moreover, the sail is extremely simple to operate. When the wind changes, the sailor only needs to rely on the capstan rope to control the direction of the wind boom under the upper edge gaff sail, and let it rotate to the opposite direction with the mast as the axis. Even one or two sailors can easily handle the reversal of an upper edge gaff sail, and it takes a short time. Unlike a square-rigged sail, since the sail is lowered from the upper mast, every time the ship is sailed, the sailor needs to climb up the mast dozens of meters high to lower the sail and tie it firmly. It is also very troublesome to retract the sails. Sailors need to climb up the mast dozens of meters high, first untie the lower end of the firmly tied cross sail, then retract it upwards and tie it to the upper mast. Such operations are nothing when the wind is calm. But if you suddenly encounter a storm, it will be terrible. Because storms at sea often bring heavy rain. If the sails are not retracted quickly, the ship may be overturned by the violent storm. However, the retracting of the cross sail requires sailors to climb up and untie the lower end of the cross sail, and then retract it upwards. Climbing the mast at ordinary times is nothing, but climbing the mast during a storm is very dangerous. Because the mast stained with rain is relatively slippery. If you are not careful, you may fall from a mast dozens of meters high and die on the spot. Therefore, in the age of discovery, there are many sailors who fell from the mast and died every year. The upper edge girder sail is different, because the upper edge girder sail, like the Chinese hard sail, rises from the bottom, just like raising the national flag. When a storm comes, just untie the rope under the mast and lower the gaff. Even the gaff can be lowered along with it. The gaff is usually connected to the boom at the bottom, it can also be removed, and the edge near the mast is connected to the mast through many copper rings that are wrapped around the mast. When raising the sail, the sailor pulls the pulley to pull the top of the gaff upward. First, the top of the triangular sail above the gaff. After the triangular sail is straightened, the gaff that is wrapped around the mast through the metal ring will rise together until the gaff reaches the top and pulls the mainsail below almost straight. Usually it will not be pulled too tight because it needs to be sailed. Then, tie the rope, fix it, and start turning the boom, adjusting the direction according to the wind direction. What? How do you keep the boom and the gaff in the same plane? This is very simple, just make a vertical guide rail on the boom. In addition to the metal ring covering the mast, the upper gaff must also cover the guide rail parallel to the mast. In this way, the wind boom and the upper gaff can be fully guaranteed to be on the same plane. Moreover, it does not affect the rise and fall of the upper gaff. Because of the fear that the ship would run aground or hit a reef in the Strait of Magellan, Marin decided to promote this advanced and easy-to-operate upper gaff sail to Aben's fleet. As for the problem of the sinking of clippers using multiple upper edge gaffs, Marin felt that as long as he did not do something stupid and install multiple upper edge gaffs on very thin clippers, it would be fine. Moreover, Marin did not have very thin clippers at present. There should be no danger in using upper edge gaffs on ships with an aspect ratio equal to or less than 4:1, and the number of masts used should not exceed 3. Moreover, even if the existence of the upper edge gaffs affects the lateral stability of the ship, it is nothing. At most, a pair of simple anti-roll fins can be installed under the hull. Marin knows that it was mentioned in the encyclopedia in his previous life that for ships with a displacement of less than 1,000 tons, a pair of anti-roll fins is enough. But the ships that Marin currently has do not have a displacement of more than 1,000 tons, and even 500 tons are rare. Therefore, when installing anti-roll fins, there is no need to install any modern anti-roll fins that conform to hydrodynamics. Just a pair of ordinary anti-roll fins that are symmetrical on both sides is enough to balance. Besides, Marin thinks that as long as you don't use clipper ships with gaff sails, you may not even need fins. After all, fins are used to balance fast ships. The ships that Marin has now are not fast and are relatively wide, so fins are not needed at all. Chapter 739 of the text volume. There is no steering wheel. After deciding to use the upper edge girder sail, Marin immediately started to transform the ship. Because it has not yet been finalized, Marin locked the ship's transformation target on the 250 type armed merchant ship with a displacement of 250 tons. Moreover, Marin has the most of this type of ship. However, in order to achieve the ideal effect, Marin personally came to the Emden shipyard to supervise and guide the shipbuilding craftsmen to transform the ship. However, for safety reasons, Marin decided to start with the transformation of the sail of the rear mast. As for the front mast, it will remain as it is for the time being. The reason for this is that although Marin knows the principle of the upper edge girder sail, he has no experience in how to control the upper edge girder sail. After all, China is a country that closed its doors to the outside world during the age of exploration. When sailing warships were popular, the country was in the Qing dynasty. When China overthrew the Qing dynasty and began to open its eyes to the world, the era of sailing had ended. Therefore, although China has a long history, there are really few people who understand Western sailing ships, and there is no tradition of driving sailing ships. The ships that Marin has seen in later generations are all diesel-powered. Or, it is so small that it can be paddled with oars. In other words, Marin is just a theorist and has never had practical experience in sailboat control. This leads to the fact that he can only talk nonsense. The specific operation of the upper edge gaff sail still depends on the sailors to explore by themselves. In this context, it is more risky to replace all the sails on the ship with upper edge gaff sails. The safest way is to test it with the mast near the stern first. Even if there is a problem, the worst thing is to drop the sail. The manufacture of the upper edge gaff sail is very simple. With Marin's theoretical guidance, find a few craftsmen to make a batch of copper rings connecting the mast and the windward pole, the upper edge gaff and the sail. The reason why copper rings are used instead of iron rings is naturally because copper is not afraid of water. After it was built, Marin arranged for the craftsmen to connect the thick copper rings to the windward pole and the upper edge gaff, and connect the copper rings to the sails. Then, first put the thick copper ring with the windward pole on the top of the rear mast, and then put on a series of thin copper rings connected to the sail. Then, put on the thick copper ring connected to the upper edge girder. However, before putting on the upper edge girder, the craftsman also installed a vertical upward guide rail on the wind mast. There are two copper rings connected to the upper edge girder, the thick copper ring is wrapped around the mast, and the thin copper ring is wrapped around the guide rail. Finally, a triangular sail is put on above the upper edge girder. There is also a string of thin copper rings near the mast of the triangular sail. The top copper ring is connected to a pulley at the top of the mast through a rope, which is convenient for sailors to raise the sail below, just like raising the national flag. But when the upper edge girder sail was installed on the rear mast of the 250 armed merchant ship and tested at sea, Marin discovered another serious problem: there was no steering wheel like a steering wheel in this era. In Marin's impression, the sailing ships during the Great Voyage were all commanded by the captain to turn the steering wheel. The captain often shouted commands such as, left rudder, 20, right full rudder, or right rudder. Then, the first mate supervised several sailors to turn the steering wheel. Before, Marin had also been on a sailboat, but he had never been to the stern to see it, and thought that there was also a steering wheel there. But this time, when discussing with the old sailors how to control the upper edge of the gaff sail, Marin accidentally came to the stern to control the rudder, and really saw how the sailors of this era controlled the rudder. Marin looked at the captains shouting and directing the sailors to play crowbars there to control the steering of the hull instead of turning the legendary steering wheel. He shook his head and rubbed his eyes, thinking that he must have seen a fake Great Voyage. However, the picture is still the same. I saw 4 strong sailors with bare upper bodies, under the supervision of the first mate, trying hard to turn a long crowbar that was vertically connected to the rudder below. When turning, there was a creaking sound. The 4 strong sailors also had sweat on their heads and shouted slogans, as if they were struggling. Is it so hard to turn the rudder? Marin asked Captain Kidd, who was accompanying him on the inspection, in surprise. Kidd nodded and said, yes, it is so hard. This is not bad. The wind and waves in the North Sea are not bad now. If there are big winds and waves, it takes more force to turn the vertical tiller, and 4 strong men may not be able to turn it. This 250-ton ship is better. On a 500-ton warship, because the rudder is bigger, heavier and more difficult to turn, it usually takes 6 to 8 strong men to turn the vertical tiller. Fuck. Marin suddenly burst into swearing. However, no one could understand this Chinese-style swearing. It seems that the upper edge of the gaff is not the most important thing. Getting a steering wheel first is the most important thing. Marin watched the scene of controlling the vertical rudder for a while and felt really hard. Seeing the scene of the 4 strong men sweating profusely, Marin felt that it was a waste of manpower. According to the captain, these 4 strong men are the first shift, and 4 more sailors will be found to take over in a few hours. In this way, a large number of sailors are needed just to turn the rudder, which is a waste of human resources. So, after the ship docked, Marin immediately sent guards to find a few mechanical experts. Da Vinci, the old guy, had been sent to North America by Marin to test the use of steam engines to drive water pumps for irrigation some time ago. Therefore, Marin can only settle for the second best and find a few other mechanical experts. As for mechanical experts, who can compare with watchmakers in this era? These people can play with small gears and are the most proficient in machinery. Of course, some senior blacksmiths are also needed to build the equipment they need. After several big watchmakers hired from Italy arrived, Marin gave them a task to create a mechanical system that can realize the steering of the rudder by turning the wheel. Moreover, it is best that one person can turn it. Not only that, Marin also requires the whole system to be as simple as possible, and it needs to be resistant to seawater corrosion. For example, iron parts cannot be used to avoid being corroded and rusted by seawater. For this reason, the craftsmen unanimously decided to use corrosion-resistant copper to make gears and other parts. Marin attached great importance to this system and offered a high reward of 1,000 gold coins per person. Although the reward is very high, Marin thinks it is very worthwhile. Because it is of great significance to the great voyage. You know, it is very inconvenient to control the rudder with the current vertical rudder. Not only is it laborious, but the steering angle is also very small, with a maximum steering angle of 5 degrees. This also causes the ship to turn very slowly. If you encounter shoals or reefs, if you turn slowly, you may still encounter them. Therefore, Marin requires that the new steering wheel must allow the rudder to turn more than 30 degrees. After making these requirements, Marin left first and returned to Auric. With the efficiency of these watchmakers, Marin estimated that he would not be able to come up with a reliable steering wheel in a short time. It is not difficult for them to come up with a steering wheel, after all, they are all professionals. However, it is difficult to come up with a reliable and durable steering wheel. Because whether it is reliable and durable requires a long time of testing before it can be finalized. Therefore, when Aben took the fleet to the Pacific side of Panama to build cities and ports this time, he was afraid that he would not be able to wait for these people to come up with a mature steering wheel, and he had to use a vertical rudder to steer the ship. Fortunately, the upper edge gaff sail is very simple to control. Although Marin himself did not understand, those old sailors had basically figured out how to operate the upper edge gaff sail. There are only some details left, and Aben's fleet can continue to test it during the voyage. Anyway, only the rear mast at the stern uses the upper edge gaff sail, which does not affect the overall situation. In this way, Aben's fleet, a total of 10 250 class armed merchant ships, fully loaded with personnel and supplies, embarked on the journey to Panama City. In addition to the task of building a city in a port at the location of Panama City, they also had the task of building a transit station on Santa Maria Island near Concepcion, Chile. After all, the voyage from Granada to Panama City was too long, and a transit station for replenishing fresh water was needed. In the future, the development of Chilean saltpeter might also need this as a springboard. Therefore, during this voyage, when passing Santa Maria Island, Aben would leave a small team of people and build a small bunker by the river on Santa Maria Island. Later, this bunker would be expanded into a transit port, specifically responsible for replenishing fresh water and food for ships coming and going. Chapter 740, Exchange of Interests. Because it takes time to develop the steering wheel, and the upper edge gaff sail also needs further testing along the way, but these have nothing to do with Marin, so now Marin suddenly feels that he has nothing to do. Marin suddenly regretted why didn't he study engineering before crossing. If he became an industrial designer, he would know how to make everything, which would save trouble. It would be best to lead everyone directly into the era of internal combustion engines, and then dominate the world within 10 years. Unfortunately, Marin is a liberal arts student and can only talk big. Many truths have been seen in books or novels. However, he can only talk big. Let him do it himself, he is not as good as an apprentice craftsman. Moreover, what makes Marin depressed is that he crossed over to the magnificent age of exploration, but unfortunately, he crossed too early. It was actually the beginning period. That's fine, many navigation technologies have not appeared yet. For this reason, Marin had to busy himself to build a galleon. Now, he has to be busy with the upper edge gaff sail and the roulette steering wheel. There is none of this, and Marin needs to do it. But he can do nothing but talk. Therefore, Marin could only talk nonsense first, and then let those confused craftsmen explore and develop by themselves. This time was greatly wasted. But then again, it was not easy for Marin to know those scientific principles. Even the physics and chemistry knowledge of high school level in later generations was extremely advanced in this era. Leonardo da Vinci, the smartest scientist of this era, was amazed at Marin's scientific talent and even admitted defeat. But what surprised Leonardo da Vinci was that Marin spoke all kinds of physics and chemistry knowledge very well. But once it comes to the hands-on stage, he is super useless. Even Leonardo da Vinci, who was an experimental assistant, thought he was useless. In desperation, Marin had to bring up the so-called great sage Einstein, whose grandfather's grandfather was not yet born, and said, "This is what my teacher Einstein taught me, I knew it, but I didn't practice it." In this way, it makes sense. Just when Marin was regretting that he didn't learn more engineering skills in his previous life in the palace, the guards came to report that Duke John II of Clever was visiting. Upon hearing that this ally was visiting, Marin immediately cheered up and warmly received John II. After all, Marin now needs help from the other party. Because of his bad reputation among the princes, in order to avoid stimulating the German princes too much, Marin decided to declare war on Geddes in the name of Duke John II of Clever and seize most of the territory of the Duchy of Geddes. Then, Duke John II of Clever hired Marin's army to attack the Duchy of Geddes and seize the very fertile land in the lower reaches of the Rhine in the Netherlands of the Duchy of Geddes. As for the reward for hiring, it was the Mark country that Marin had been thinking about day and night. And the Mark country is the core area of the Ruhr area and a major coal-producing area. Therefore, for Marin, Duke John II of Clever is definitely a master who cannot be offended and needs to be served well. For this reason, Marin ordered the prince's middle gate to open wide. Then, he personally brought Prime Minister Geoffrey and General Schwartz and other civil and military officials to welcome John II with high-standard etiquette to welcome the king. When John II's carriage entered the palace, Marin even rode a horse to accompany the carriage. "Oh, Grand Duke Marin, you are too polite," John II said with a smile. Although he was polite, John II's grinning mouth showed that the other party was very satisfied. For traditional European ancient nobles, face, that is, honor, is the most important. In many cases, face is even more important than gold coins. Therefore, Marin's face-giving approach is still very useful to John II, an old noble. Moreover, Marin is now a Grand Duke. Although the Grand Duke Marin specifically stated that he was on the same level as the Duke, the Grand Duke was the Grand Duke, and his status was higher than that of the Duke. Now, the Grand Duke Marin gave him such face and welcomed him with the high-standard etiquette of welcoming the king, which still made John II feel very proud. In addition, coincidentally, John II also had the ambition to be king in his heart. Unfortunately, his two fiefdoms had no money and no strong army. Therefore, John II's ambition to be king could only be thought about in his heart. And Marin happened to welcome him with the etiquette of welcoming the king, which also happened to let John II get a taste of being a king. After the host and the guest sat down, Marin first asked his men to serve the Earl Grey milk tea, which was very popular nowadays, and then he asked directly, "Welcome to Lord John's visit, but Lord John usually doesn't go abroad easily. I don't know what you are doing in Auric this time. Europeans don't like to beat around the bush, and Germans are even more straightforward." So Marin asked his doubts directly. After taking a sip of Earl Grey milk tea, Duke John II of Clever took his time. He did not directly answer Marin's question, but asked, "I heard that Lord Marin has a lot of good-tasting liquor for sale. It seems to be called whiskey." Marin immediately understood, it turned out to be for rye ergotu. Marin did not think that John II came to buy wine specifically. If a duke came in person, it must not be about buying wine for personal consumption. Then, there is only one possibility, this guy wants to be an agent to sell whiskey. Only when he is an agent can he make enough money. However, Marin clearly remembers that this 40-degree liquor is not popular in Germany. Because the Germans prefer low-alcohol beer. So, Marin asked directly. Lord John, I remember that the Germans don't like this kind of liquor very much. The implication is that Marin is not optimistic about the sales of whiskey in the Principality of Clever and the Earldom of Mark. John II smiled and said. Of course I know this, so I want more than just the exclusive distribution rights of the Principality of Clever and the Earldom of Mark. The sales of spirits in these two regions are indeed not very good. But, my brother's Teutonic Knights, spirits will be very popular. So that's it. Marin suddenly realized. Although the Teutonic state is a country ruled by the Teutonic Knights, the main population of the Teutonic state, the Prussians, are Slavs. It is worth noting that the Prussians mentioned here are the indigenous people of East Prussia, and have little to do with the so-called Prussians of the later Kingdom of Prussia. The so-called Prussians of the Kingdom of Prussia are actually mostly Germans. The Prussians referred to here are the indigenous people of the Teutonic Knights, the Slavs. They are actually Slavs who were forced to speak German by the Knights of the Teutonic Knights and gradually Germanized. Later, they gradually merged with the Germans. The living habits of the native Prussians are naturally different from those of the Germans. Like the Poles, they also love to drink, and the stronger the drink, the better. Moreover, the population of the Teutonic Knights is as high as 1 million, most of whom are native Prussians. Therefore, the Teutonic Knights is definitely a big market for strong liquor. Therefore, Marin admires John II's vision. If it were normal, Marin might refuse John II's request. After all, this is a request to share money with Marin for nothing. But now, Marin really can't refuse. Because it is too important for Marin to seize the Mark country, but the Mark country is in the hands of the other party. Moreover, the attack on the Principality of Guedes also requires the other party to come forward. Therefore, even if he is reluctant, Marin still decides to surrender. Okay, I agree. But, what about Grand Master Philip? After all, the Teutonic Kingdom is under the jurisdiction of Grand Master Philip, the younger brother of John II. Therefore, this benefit is indispensable to Grand Master Philip. Don't worry, it was Philip who asked me to talk to you this time. Philip and I will share the profits from selling wine. Marin understood in a second. This was a reminder to him that the interests of the two people needed to be divided more. Moreover, this also explains why John II knew that Marin personally helped to promote whiskey. After all, Teutonic and Poland are neighbors. It is no surprise that such a big thing happened in Poland. Okay, I will sell it to you at a 30% discount on the selling price. 70%. Can it be lower? John II naturally hopes to make more profit. Lord John, the cost of brewing is very high. In order to obtain high-quality wine, the waste of brewing this kind of wine is very large. Only the most essential part of the brewed wine can be extracted to ensure that the wine does not choke. I have given you a 30% discount, and I have already given up more than half of the profit. Marin tried hard to fool John II, who did not know the technology of brewing ergotu. Moreover, he did not know that Marin had a lot of grain in his hands, and thought that Marin was buying grain to make wine. So, Duke John II of Clever agreed to this sharing method. Then I wish us a pleasant cooperation. I will exchange the Mark's kingdom with you as promised. The premise is that you have to conquer most of the territory of the Principality of Guedes and exchange it with me. Okay, it's a deal,